The indigo thread. The scent of old silk and quiet decay was a language Aries understood in her bones. Her Kyoto studio was a capsule of perpetual twilight, lit only by the adjustable lamp that hovered like a benevolent moon over her work table. Before her lay the patient, a ko-sewed kimono from the late Edo period, once worn by a geisha named Kiyomi. Time had been cruel. The indigo-dyed silk was brittle along the folds, the embroidered cherry blossoms along the hem fraying into ghostly petals. Aris's tools were arranged with monastic precision, her hari needles, finer than eyelashes, spools of silk thread she dyed herself to match ancient hues, and the shincha boards that gently stretched the fabric without stress. Her work was reconstruction, not restoration. To fix without erasing the history. She was tracing a long, sorrowful tear along the sleeve's inner seam when she felt it, not a sound, but a presence. A shift in the quality of the air, like the moment before a scent arrives. The hair on her arms lifted. She glanced around the still studio. Nothing. Shaking her head, she returned to the tear. As her needle dipped to make the first supportive stitch, a breath cool and faintly floral brushed her ear. A woman's voice, soft as unraveling thread, whispered a single word, slowly. Aries froze. The needle trembled in her fingers. The voice hadn't been heard, it had been felt, vibrating in the marrow of her jaw. It carried the weight of immense age and profound patience. Her own engagement ring, a simple band she still wore though the wedding was off, felt suddenly heavy on her finger. Mark had returned it 2 months ago with a sigh about different life trajectories. The tear in the silk seemed to pulse in her vision, mirroring the cleaner, sharper tear inside her. Swallowing hard, she followed the ghost's advice. She slowed her breath, her hand. The needle slid through the fragile silk with exquisite slowness, a union of new thread and old fabric. As she pulled the stitch taut, a warmth bloomed in her chest, unexpected and sweet. It was the first sensation other than numb grief she'd felt in weeks. A memory that was not her own surfaced behind her eyes, a man's calloused hand, not Mark's, gently brushing a fallen cherry blossom from a woman's shoulder. The touch was electric, reverent. A promise made without words. Aries gasped, dropping the needle. The vision evaporated, leaving only the silent studio and the frantic beat of her own heart. She stared at the kimono. It was no longer just a historical artifact. It was a vessel, and it was beginning to speak. She returned the next night, drawn not by duty but by a quiet, magnetic pull. The studio felt different, expectant. She lit a single stick of sandalwood incense, its smoke curling like a question mark in the still air. "Kiyomi," she whispered, feeling foolish. The air by the east wall shimmered, a heat haze in the cool room. A form coalesced from the motes of dust and lamplight, not a full apparition, but an impression. The silhouette of a woman in a kimono, head tilted, with the elegant posture of the floating world. Aries couldn't see her face, but she felt her gaze. The ghost's presence wasn't frightening, it was profoundly lonely. Aries picked up her needle. This time, she worked on a small, discolored spot near the collar. As she began the meticulous process of couching a new thread over the weakened area, the voice came again, clearer now. "The indigo is deepest where the dye is suffered." Another flash, another stolen memory. Kiyomi, younger, standing over a vat of fermenting indigo. Her hands are stained a deep blue-black up to her wrists. The process is foul-smelling, laborious. An elderly master nods his approval. The color holds the struggle, he says. That is its beauty. Aries understood. The repair wasn't about hiding the damage. It was about honoring the story the damage told. Her own indigo was the grief of her broken engagement, a stain she'd been trying to bleach out. But what if she let it be part of her new color? She worked for hours in a trance. Kiyomi guided her not with words, but with shared sensation. Aries would feel a cool pressure on her wrist, guiding her angle. A flush of warmth would spread from her stomach when a stitch was perfectly placed. It was an intimacy more profound than any she'd shared with Mark, a meeting of souls across centuries in the sacred space of a single, perfect stitch. When she finally set her needle down, the small spot was stabilized, the new threads embracing the old weakness without disguising it. Exhaustion washed over her, but it was a clean exhaustion. For the first time in months, she slept through the night, dreaming not of loss, but of deep, tranquil vats of blue. The lessons became nightly rituals. Aries would bring green tea, pouring 2 cups. The steam from Kiyomi's cup would curl and then still, as if sipped by invisible lips. One evening, working on the ornate cherry blossom embroidery, Aries pricked her finger. A single bead of blood welled up, crimson against the pale silk. Before she could move, a cool breath sighed over her hand. The ghost's form grew slightly more substantial. Aries could almost make out the curve of a cheek, the line of a brow. Blood is also a thread, Kiyomi's voice murmured, a hint of wry sadness in it. It binds the living to the living, and the dead to the memory of life. The memory this time was visceral, sensual. Kiyomi in a moonlit garden, her kimono loosened at the collar. The man from the first memory, a samurai forbidden to her, traces the line of her jaw with his thumb. Their kiss is not frantic, but deep and slow, a communion. The taste of him is of pine and iron. The scent of night-blooming jasmine is everywhere. When his calloused hand slides beneath her silk obi to rest on the bare skin of her hip, the sensation is not of fire, but of homecoming. A perfect, agonizing fit. Aries' breath caught. The memory faded, but the physical echo of it thrummed in her own body, a phantom heat low in her belly, a tightening in her breasts. It had been so long since she'd been touched with that kind of reverent hunger. Her own body had felt like a deserted house since Mark left. Now, it was as if Kiyomi's memory had thrown open the windows, letting in a fresh, shocking breeze. She looked at her own hands, practical, skilled, stained with tiny marks from needles and thread. Could they ever inspire that kind of passion? Could she? He left you too, didn't he? Aries whispered to the shimmering air. The ghost's silence was confirmation. A love story severed not by choice, but by fate. Their shared grief was another thread between them, indigo dark and strong. That night, Aries didn't just repair the embroidery, she re-inhabited it. Each petal she secured felt like preserving a piece of Kiyomi's joy. Her own wounded heart, she realized, was not a flaw to be hidden. It was the deepest part of her dye, the part that would give her future love its enduring richness. The final tear was the most intimate, a long, vertical split down the inner lining, near the heart of the garment. It was here that the kimono would have felt the wearer's warmth, the quickened pulse of emotion. As Aries prepared her finest thread, Kiyomi's presence filled the room, almost solid. Aries could feel the coolness of her, a sensation like standing near a shaded stream in summer. This is the last one. Kiyomi's voice was a clear bell now. My final memory. Let me show you. The memory unfolded not as a flash, but as a full immersion, the samurai's room. Dawn is threatening. Their night is over. He holds her face in his hands, his eyes holding a world of sorrow. I am being sent away. To a battle I will not return from. Kiyomi says nothing. There are no tears. Instead, she takes a small, sharp knife from his dressing table. With solemn grace, she slices the inner lining of her own kimono, the one she wears now. A long, clean tear. Then, she takes his dagger and does the same to the inner sleeve of his underrobe. Now, she says, her voice steady, a part of me will go with you. And a part of you stays with me. We are mended into each other. Forever. Their final kiss is a seal. It tastes of salt and ultimate belonging. Aries was weeping as the memory released her. The tear in the silk was no longer a wound, it was a testament. A sacred, deliberate rupture to ensure connection beyond separation. Her hands were steady as she began. This repair would not be invisible. She used a slightly darker indigo thread, making the stitching a visible, raised line a scar of honor. As she worked, she wasn't just sewing fabric. She was stitching Kiyomi's courage into her own soul, mending her own inner tear with threads of resilience she didn't know she possessed. With the final stitch, a profound silence settled. The oppressive, lonely atmosphere of the studio had lifted. The air felt light, clean. Kiyomi's form appeared one last time, fully visible. She was breathtakingly beautiful, her face a mask of serene peace. She smiled at Aries, a smile of infinite gratitude and release. Then she looked down at the kimono, now whole but telling its complete story, and placed a translucent hand over her own heart. Thank you, she breathed. You have given me back my ending. Now, go and live your beginning. She faded, not into nothing, but into the sunlight now breaking through the high window, becoming one with the golden dust motes dancing in the dawn. Aries sat alone in the quiet studio for a long time, the completed kimono glowing softly in the morning light. The ghost was gone, her story integrated, her peace won. The emptiness Aries felt wasn't loss, it was spaciousness. A room in her heart had been cleaned out, ready for new life. She looked at the engagement ring on her finger. Gently, she slid it off. It was not a rejection of the past, but a release of its claim on her present. She placed it in a small lacquer box on her shelf. It was an artifact of her own history now, valuable but no longer binding. Weeks later, the kimono was displayed in a museum exhibit titled Repaired Histories. Aries visited on opening night. She stood before it, not as its restorer, but as a fellow traveler. A man in a well-cut but comfortable linen shirt stopped beside her, studying the visible dark stitch along the lining. It's bold, he said, his voice thoughtful. Most would try to hide it. This artist chose to honor the break. He had kind eyes and the strong, careful hands of a woodworker. Yes, Aries agreed, a smile touching her lips. She understood that the break is part of the story. And sometimes, the repair itself becomes the most beautiful part.